Okay, there we go. All that bits and bobs taken care of. Welcome all. I know that you'll still be kind of getting things set up and audio will be connecting and so on. So I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes to do that. But I want to say hi to you all. Okay, there we go. All that bits and bobs taken care of. YouTube thing. Welcome all. I know that you'll still be kind of getting things set up and audio. There we go. That's weird when the YouTube thing starts. Yes, so thank you all for joining us tonight. Sorry, I had to do my little fiddly tech bits. I'm Carolyn Jess Cook. I'm the founder and director of the Stay at Home Literary Festival, which is now on day 11, I think. I am so pleased to be joined today by Jay Griffiths. And we're going to be hearing from Jay about her new book, Why Rebel, which is absolutely phenomenal. So I'm just going to introduce Jay and I'll talk a little bit about the book before passing over to her. So Jay Griffiths is the author of many books, including Wild, An Elemental Journey, Kith, The Riddle of the Childscape, Tristimania, and Pip Pip, A Sideways Look at Time. She won the Discover Award for the Best First-Time Author in the USA, the inaugural Orion Award, and the Hay International Fellowship. Jay has broadcast and written widely, including for Radiohead and the Royal Shakespeare Company. I don't think many people can say that, both Radiohead and the RSC. Her work has received widespread accolades, including from Gary Snyder, Barry Lopez, Don Patterson, John Berger, Philip Pullman, KT Tunstall, and Nikolai Fraiture. So we're going to be hearing a little bit this evening from Why Rebel, which is a collection of 11 essays and reads very much as a continuation. Would you say this is fair to say, Jay? A continuation of the discourses, analysis, and call to action that infuse your previous works, always blending the personal with the political, always using both narrative and poetry to make the reader care about climate crisis, about the planet, about inequality, and about genocide. And one of the standout lines in the book, and believe me, there are many in this book. I bought this on Kindle and it's full of highlighted sections, but one of the lines in this book that really stood out to me is, the job of a writer is to be a good messenger for others, even if it is difficult. Why Rebel covers a vast range of subjects that all seem global in terms of their significance. And one of the ways that I think this book connects with your previous work, Wild, is this definition where you talk about wilderness not as a place to be tamed, but as self-willed. And in fact, you talk about Earth as self-willed. In that book, I think you say, and I quote, "The aboriginal I am, Earth is the rebel against the whole damn solar system." So welcome, Jay. I'm honored to have you here and I'm looking forward to hearing more about this book.
Oh, thank you so much, Carolyn. What an introduction. That's so nice. Hello, everybody. I wish I could see you, but I can't. Yes, what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of talk about the book, which actually reads from quite a few bits of it, and then there is a bit of time at the end. One of the things that I have to say when I was writing this book is that there are not many times in my life where I have cried for 3 days straight, but I did when I read about the destruction of insects. And it's not because I've got any special kind of, insects are not a hobby of mine or anything like that. It was just that what I saw was the sense of the absolute devastation that would bring. So I wrote about insects, and this is how I want to begin. But it is a book that encompasses the many, many ways in which obviously kind of destruction, but also it's a book about language, it's a book about metaphor, it's a book about empathy and mind. So I wish that everyone who said they believed in angels would actually believe in insects, because thanks to the insects we have food. but it is also insects who tactfully and quietly remove the dead. And without them, we would be wading through corpses at every step we took. They don't take the title of angels, being by nature bashful and unassuming. They go by other names: firefly, bee, ant, caddisfly. But we humans, it seems, value irreal angels more than the priceless reality of insects. We need the living world, that truest of worlds, both in death and in life. Thanks to other animals, human life is vitalized. Animals, their senses alert to every scent and whisper through their paws and their antennae and their wingtips and their noses. They are our guides and they are our healers. Mindedness surrounds us in air and water, on land and under the soil, where the lovely, holy worm, in sweet complicity with the dreaming earth, quickens death itself to life. And there, in that transforming dark, trees are messaging each other through their roots. And where tree roots link with fungi, the network of underground awareness is able to respond differently to the presence of different creatures. Awareness surrounds us and it's tingling. Perhaps nowhere in my experience is quite so full of life as the forest of the Amazon. It's bursting and writhing and tickling and rotting. Death itself is merely matter re-quickened into something else, because everything is a part of that shape-shifting metamorphosis at the green core of life. In the Amazon, I felt, as I never had before, that I had touched the quick of the thing. I'd put my finger to the pulse at the heart of the world in an experience of empathy with that wildest of creatures, the jaguar. Indigenous societies in the Amazon have never forgotten the mindedness of life, honoring it with a way of thinking that is empathetic, it's willing to cross borders, to link with other species, a way of walking immersed in the true world and sensitive to its ethic. And how we walk the earth has never mattered more than now. How we treat it in the spirit of gift or theft, a bill or a prayer. It has never mattered more than now, not only for that intrinsic value of the living world, but for humanity's health and well-being. In a pretty startling demonstration, the coronavirus that has so traumatized the world was unleashed by our destruction of forest habitat and the slaughter of wild creatures. So I want to ask you, where were you when the music stopped? When everything ceased, the schools closed, the churches that were shut, the pubs that were silent, friends couldn't meet. We cancelled everything. We cancelled everything to fight the virus: weddings, work, exams, football, theatre. We stopped doing everything except the very thing that had caused the virus in the first place, annihilating the living world. Forests have been destroyed for cattle to feed the insatiable appetite for beef. Wildlife is slaughtered for tame life. A soya is grown on previously forested land to feed the chicken industry. Bereft of their seclusion in the forests, wild creatures were forced into contact and the virus jumped to humans. It's also the case, as that brilliant film Seaspiracy notes, that when people are unable to fish for themselves on their own shores, they will look for food from bushmeat. Astonishingly, the causes are all quietly noted and nothing changes. Although humans are just 0.01% of all life, we have destroyed 83% of wild mammals, and we have done so with so little awareness. Now, aghast, we begin to see and to name. The human conscience needs to be corroborate with the natural world, aligned to its ethic, furthering a politics of kindness. But a political stance that is the opposite of kindness is on the rise. libertarian fascism with its triumphal brutalism, its racism and misogyny, the politics that loathes the living world. It's tonally fascistic in many countries, it's openly so in some, and in the case of Brazil, it launches its assault on the Amazon and the peoples of the earth who live within those forests. And there it is a chiaroscuro of cruelty. I expect most of you have got very used to your face mask and wearing it. I do particularly love mine. I love it for what it is. I love it because, as it happens, a friend made it. But I love it for what it means. It's an emblem of kindness. The face mask doesn't protect the wearer, but it protects others. It's inherently public-spirited. Its ethos is communal. It's an expression of considerateness, particularly for the vulnerable. In a pandemic, such as COVID-19, the values that are needed are kindness, concern, and humanity. But the countries that have suffered the most, the USA under Trump, Brazil, the UK, and now India, all had leaders who were capable only of the opposite qualities. Where humility was needed to heed advice and to act with care and with caution, what did they do? They displayed a reckless superbia. Where compassion was required to protect the vulnerable, they responded with cruelty and carelessness. Let the bodies pile high. Where a respect for limitation was necessary, wearing masks, obeying lockdown rules, they showed their contemptuous desire to be free of such fetters. The refusal to wear face masks was politicized. This was far more than a detail of partisan identity. It was an eloquent and significant expression of the creep of far-right libertarianism. In Brazil, President Bolsonaro admires dictators, including Pinochet. Nationalist, homophobic, misogynist, he is dangerously racist towards indigenous people. It's a shame, he says. It's a shame that the Brazilian cavalry hasn't been as efficient as the Americans who exterminated the Indians. What a disgusting line. Bolsonaro has also vetoed COVID-19 aid for indigenous people, saying such provisions are, quotes, against the public interest. Due to COVID-19, Brazil has lost a generation of indigenous leaders and elders, and with their deaths went the tribal culture and the medicine they knew. We are facing extermination, they have said. Meanwhile, wanting to end indigenous rights to their territories, Bolsonaro has encouraged landrace to soar and has spoken of giving the ranchers guns. At the center of libertarianism is contempt for the weak. They recognize no victims, only people who play victim. Libertarians hate regulations that protect others, be it environmental laws or face mask regulations. Libertarians loathe fetters on personal freedom. They perceive the face mask as a muzzle. As libertarians promote the idea of free speech at any price and enjoy the practice of hate speech, as they campaign against all libel laws and so-called cancel culture. So a masked mouth covered and silent is the emblem of what they most detest, being gagged. Because libertarianism loathes any tether or shackle or constraint. But what is it, this liberty, this freedom? I believe in liberty, I believe in freedom, but their idea, libertarians' idea of liberty and freedom is actually freedom for the few. It drives unfettered capitalism and the unregulated industry that allows some people to live like gods by making others live like cattle. Characteristics such as kindness, modesty, slowness, generosity, receptivity, pity, honesty, and truth are detested by the libertarian outlook, for they are the fettered emotions. In honesty, you are bound to tell the truth. You are tied by respect. You are linked to others by love. You are tethered by kindness to a kinship with nature. You are restrained by a sense of justice and conscience. That's why libertarians loathe political correctness, because it puts the brakes on bigotry, it restricts racism, it reins in sexism. But what has been set in motion is an ideology of monoism without plurality or otherness, furious for its own freedom, an idiot divinity unleashed upon the world. It's dishonest, deceitful, power hungry, and lacking in empathy. When I am writing, one of the things that is really important to me is to let language speak, partly in words. I absolutely adore etymology. So, for example, I can tell you my favorite piece of etymology is that the word true is related to tree, and tree is also related to trust and betroth and tryst and endure. I love etymology, but I also really love metaphor. And I don't mean that kind of, the sort of device that you learn about in school, or you kind of like practice if you kind of go on to study English literature or something like that. I mean metaphor as a way of practicing empathy. It's like a stance of the psyche. It's a way of understanding otherness, making stories of connection and relation. Metaphor comprehends the world of spirit and imagination. It deals in pluralities and the unmeasurable. It doesn't seek to deceive, but rather to augment truth. Metaphor is the opposite of rhetoric, and it works like a kind of anti-fascism in the human mind. Both art and, interestingly, shamanism really deeply use the realm of metaphor, where emotion is expressed and where healing happens. With that metaphoric vision, profoundly seeing what connects two things, profoundly enabling people to speak their experience, empathy flows, it knows no borders. Both artist and shaman create harmony within an individual and between the individual and the wider environment, a way of thinking essential for life. But ours has become an age of lethal literalism, which viciously attacks metaphoric insight and all its values, an age which burns the Amazon and mocks those who would protect it, sing it, and become it, an age which physically destroys the sacred sites and art of indigenous cultures. A cave, I give you one cave sacred to Indigenous Australians in the Pilbara region. It demonstrated 46,000 years of continual occupation through the last ice age and interliving memory. And it was exploded in seconds by the mining company Rio Tinto. They simply detonated one of the oldest sacred monuments in the world. They blew it up in a few minutes, one day in 2020. Why? For literalist profit, rather than the deep significance and value that that place had. Obviously, I'm not going to be completely bleak. When I was writing these essays, I was immensely drawn to animals. I love animals, and in fact, we might have an appearance of a certain domesticated tiger that I have. He's just a farm cat, but he might come crashing in at any moment. When I was writing about animals, I was completely fascinated by a bird which is called the honey guide. And it's called the honey guide because it knows where the bee's nest is, but it can't actually get the honey out on its own. It needs human hands to break open the hive, while humans need the bird to guide them to the right tree. Hence the honey guide rule. But a happy human-animal relationship depends on reciprocal exchange. It's an emblem of the best kind of relationship between humans and the more than human world, leading the psyche to sweetness. When that relationship is at its best, creatures can draw us humans into their worlds, from a water boatman to a pet cat or a wild deer. They are the filaments of our tenderness, the reach beyond our grasp, the extension of our empathy. They are the wings of our mind. One of the things in this lockdown that has possessed a lot of people is the question of how to be happy. I think a lot of people have found it extremely difficult, including me from time to time. It's been pretty hard. One of the things that animals really show us is a sense of vitality. Their vital senses can help ours grow. We can imaginatively extend ourselves out through their senses into worlds of unquenchable richness, because each creature lives paws outwards. It reaches into the world with arms and tendrils, tentacles, antennae, and fingers. Compared to many animals, we're beginners in the sense of smell. We're newcomers to sight. We're inexpert in the audible realm. And as for the octopus, I have to say I'm completely fascinated. It's like, I can only think with one brain, and they can think everywhere. But for our own safety, it seems to me now more than ever, we need to listen to those sensed communications. As before a tsunami, for instance, animals listen to each other, heeding warnings they can save themselves. There is a different kind of tsunami coming, but theirs are still the voices or the silences we need to attend. We seek an invitation into the world of fur and feathers because the true deep sense of life is formed of intermindedness. Koalas are like living teddy bears. They epitomize that sweet, furry world that children and clear-hearted adults cherish. To have one wrapped in my arms, to stroke it and love it and protect it and hug it, to press my nose to its nose, I don't know if anything in the world would make me happier. Everything has and tells a story, say Indigenous Australian Yolngu people. They say everything communicates through its own language and its own law. Indigenous cultures have kept faith with the animals as part of what it means to belong, and the world is larger and more vivid when animals and birds and insects are imbued with spirit and significance, when there is mind of unknowable diversity, elastic and ecstatic, until the very air is electric with message and there are more stories than stars. But the communication between animals and humans is sometimes a terrible reproach. I have always wanted to hear a koala call. I have never wanted to hear one cry for help. Its fur singed, its paws and nose burnt, crying little bleats of bewilderment and whimpering with pain in the arms of the Australian woman who rescued it from one of the bushfires caused by the climate crisis. Something in me died that day, and I'm not alone. We need their well-being, their voice, their happiness, their life. Sometimes when I can, I sleep out on the earth, like on it. But I am a bit nesh, I have to say. So for all I've written about wildness and for all I love wildness, I can get very cold very quickly, and I don't like getting wet. But I have become fascinated by soil, partly by what it is and partly by what it means. I've noticed that the closer my head is to the actual soil when I sleep, the more fabulous my dreams are. For Indigenous Australians, the soil contains the ancestors, not only the human ones, but the ancestor spirits who travel the land in the dreaming, and the earth is alive with them still. Indigenous cultures very commonly assert that the land has consciousness. More, the land, they say, dreams us. This beautiful enigmatic idea contains a vastness of vision, seeing our place on earth as a kind of dream. The dominant culture is now rediscovering the knowledge that Indigenous cultures have long intuited. There is mindedness beneath us. It takes a certain cast of mind to find mind under the soles of our feet. It takes a kneeling humility to regard and to respect the mind beneath us that has been called the wood wide web. But only 60 harvests are left before soils are too degraded to feed the projected world population, the United Nations has warned. The forecasts vary, in fact. Some say we have 100 harvests and some say 30. But inherent to the idea of harvests is that even if they fluctuate, they will always happen. It is grotesque to imagine this limitlessness made finite. What I have found interesting in looking at soil is that about a third of the world's soil, which is about the surface area of Mexico and the USA, is thought to have been degraded over the last 40 years. What we know about civilizations that have collapsed, from Rome and Greece and Egypt and many others, one of the key factors is that they exhausted the soil on which they depended and they collapsed as a result. Indigenous cultures typically cherish the below as a source of life, wisdom, dream, and ethics. Indigenous Australians say law comes up from the land. But the dominant culture privileges what is above rather than what is below. It looks up rather than down. We pay respects to Her Royal Highness. We pray to God in the highest. We aim for the heights of success. We speak with contempt of the lowest of the low. And Donald Trump disgustingly referred to Black Lives Matter protesters as low life. So soil is treated with contempt because it is beneath us. We English speakers misuse the word soil so that something soiled expresses not just disdain, but a kind of visceral disgust, speaking with revulsion of the very thing that sustains us. Indigenous people often express their earth ethos in that simple but deep observation, we are the land, speaking as people of the earth who retain their humble relationship to the humus, the earth, that commonwealth of humility under our feet. And those words, humus, human, humility, are all related. Humus, the earth or the ground, humble, it's lowly, it's near to the ground. Human reminds us we're made of earth. And if humility were imagined as a visible thing, it would be soil, quiet, brown, soft, maintaining networks underground and feeding the whole of the living world. The land dreams us, truly. We who live on earth, whose minds are soil-wise by starlight, are both the dreamers and the dreamed. When I was writing this book, I was really struck when I found one particular word, which I hadn't known before. And the word is endling, with an L, endling. What it means is it's the very last individual of a species at whose death the whole species is extinct. So the endling is final and forlorn. Just one individual. It's the saddest word I know in any language. It's the epitome of tragedy, in fact. And the word was coined appropriately in this age of extinction, this strange age of our dawning knowing, seeing the unhallowed horror that is approaching. To hold in your mind an endling, to stroke its feathers, to feel the pulse of its heart, to listen to its last and dying song, and then to watch the light grow dim and fade and see it fall, then the last ever, its light put out, and knowing there will never be another, the neverness, the chill at the bone and no grief like it. Words with that ending, that suffix, L-I-N-G, they are diminutive, they're tender, poignant. We speak of a foundling and a starveling. They're often bird-related, a nestling or a fledgling. There is one endling who is a little female bird, and her name is Essa, which translates as the lonely one. She's looked after in Java, in Indonesia, but at her death, the world ends. I wrote a letter for her. Dear Essa, your name, Essa, means the only one. in human language, the lonely one. After your last heartbeat, a world will be gone forever. Not, people think, an important one, only yours, but your only world. After your last flight, a freedom will be lost forever. Not, people think, an important one, only yours, but your only freedom. After your last song, a category of music will be silenced forever. Is not, people think, an important one, only yours, but your only song. And the only one you ever wanted to hear sung back to you. For while you live, you can sing your female laughing thrush call all you like, and no male will ever answer you, and you will never know why. Your story happened because of the slaughter of songbirds, in flocks once, then trapped, traded and caged, sentenced to solitary, forced to sing solo. It was bird sorrow for a status symbol. You're a nervous bird. In the photograph I have of you, you look frightened. Your eyes are an orange circle with a black center, and you don't like being in the eye line of your keepers. You are easily stressed and would rather be hidden in deep foliage, tucked in thickets of forests. You have never wanted to call attention to yourself except for a mate, but now you have the cachet of true tragedy. Your kind, the rufous-fronted laughing thrush, subspecies slamotensis, is named as the world's next most likely known extinction. So you, exactly you, Essa, one single individual bird, are the last. Your death will mark extinction. You, Essa, the lonely one, as the last individual of your kind, are an endling. This is what extinction sounds like. The silencing of song that should have been forever yours. Forever yours, Jay. As I said at the beginning, I don't often cry for 3 straight days. But when I was reading about insects, the studies were clear. They were absolutely clear, but we also know it from our own experience. Above a certain age, we all know that windscreen phenomenon where if we were driving in summer, we'd have to stop frequently to clean the insects off the windscreen. The moth snowstorm, you know, that blizzard of moths in the headlights, was the experience of every night drive. It's how insects matter to us, as well as their intrinsic value, that I want to write about. They're a gigantic collective of kindness. They dance in a constant attendance to living things. They pollinate 3/4 of our food crop and 80% of wildflowering plants. They keep the soil healthy. From their actions flow the countless forms of life, from the apple blossom to bread and roses and the silver salmon, everything that has ever flowered and ever will. And from physical life flows everything to be treasured in human life, from existence itself to the highest of the arts. It's ultimately, thanks to the insects, that we owe the flowering of culture. Michelangelo salutes them. Notre Dame bows in thanks. No insects, no Mozart. No Beatles, no Beatles. They give us choirs of insects, flights of insects, sing thee to thy rest. Without them, there would be no chorus of frogs or birdsong. For how would a bird sing without insects give it life and music? To them, we owe everything. My life and yours and yours and yours. Please tell me you understand the immensity of this. And if you don't, please think alone and quietly, perhaps, of the unfolding ending. Let me speak simply into the simplicity of your heart then, and let me just ask you, what do you love? What makes you happy? Or who? Is it a child? Is it your partner? Do you love your friend? Or little prince, do you love your rose? Do you love your dog? Your cats, your church, your home, your garden, your books, perhaps, the poetry you make, music, the pub, chess, theatre, football, the meaning you have made of your life, perhaps, your health, status, honour, or all of these. And this love then, this happiness that you hold so dear, tell me how it will even exist without the tiniest of beings, the insects, against which we have been so utterly pitiless. Without the insects for the food, the flowers, and the soil. Insecticides should be made illegal overnight. Every scrap of land turned to organic agriculture. Every shred of mental energy requisitioned for love, essentially, the love of life. This is the end, my friend. The birds, the winged messengers, can read the news and know it for grievous truth, and they're flying, starving, into the great silence. And we call ourselves sapient. I hate all kinds of bullying, and the fact that the insects are the tiniest creatures bullied by humans acting as monsters gives the fact an edge, a very personal pain. But there is, in these statistics, a vision of a desolated world, a devastated wasteland. Writers sometimes tell their readers when they struggle for words, when they experience writer's block, or when their psyches demand a fallow period. That admission is a touching one. It's a truth so precious, I do not use it lightly, but I use it now. The magnitude of this situation silences me. The words I lean towards are not enough. Tears, maybe, the raw scream of rage and pity, perhaps. But what words do you suggest I use here? Annihilation? The end of worlds? The last generation? Absolute apocalypse? If you were looking this full in the face, what expresses it sufficiently? And then a savage anger overcomes me. This is not a game. Protecting insects, children, and life itself is a necessary duty. It's incumbent on us all. We would lose, to put it bluntly, almost everything. Starvation would stalk the land for almost every kind of creature, including ourselves. I don't want to be lyrical now, I just want to swear. The collective stupidity renders all my craft useless. What writer's art can ever convey the vast, deadly, and deliberate slaughter with all its consequences that are in the sum of it all, the everything? Where to go with this gigantic stupidity? What the fuck did we think we were doing? And why the fuck are we still doing it? Intensive agriculture is killing us by killing the insects. If I sent a tweet, I would write only this: mass use of insecticides leads to mass death of insects. And I'm like, duh, who knew? For fuck's sake. What can you and I do right now? Heed the climate crisis, do things that seem small but are not, turn off outdoor lights at night, only ever, ever eat organic food. I beg you, I implore myself. And if, when you say you can't afford it, I understand, then speak about it. Do not be silent. Tell everyone around you, tell everyone in power. Take it to your council, vote without compromise for green politicians. Sit outside the office of your political representative and don't leave. Because anyone who really allows themselves to take in the magnitude of this ending, the threat to the very existence of us, feels the weight of world sorrow. Others at that time, late in 2018, were feeling it too. And a friend of mine went to a festival. She came back from the festival, like all happy and full of music and covered in mud. And she said, "Oh, Jay, met a friend of yours." And he said, "Give this leaflet to Jay. She will love it." And the leaflet was just like a very muddy, tatty little leaflet that had been through most of the mud of an entire festival. And it had 2 words at the top of it. And after those 2 words, I knew I didn't have to read much more, because those 2 words were extinction, rebellion. Thank you for listening. Thank you.
That was absolutely incredible. I'm just trying to change the way it appears on the screen, if that's okay. What a reading, gosh. Oh, maybe I'll just leave it, Jay. That was absolutely phenomenal. And I suppose I have so many questions and yet so many things that you've spoken about and written about that I just feel like I need to process. But I guess one of the key questions that we always have when we consider the magnitude and the significance and the weight of the times that we're living in and the direction we're heading is, well, what can we do? There's this sense of helplessness. And I love that you appreciate both the enormity, if that's not even a proper word to describe it, but you are dealing with the absolute enormity of these topics, but you simplify what we can do. And one of the things you said was, do not be silent. And I wondered if, because we do need, I think we need more of that, boiling it down to how activism can look, that activism takes place in the small ways. It's not always about a complete, I'm going to become completely vegan, I'm never going to use plastic again, because you talked about being tethered, and we are now almost stitched into ways of living that can feel extremely hard to change, even though they are so disastrous. But I take comfort in what you say, that there are still small ways that can make a significant difference. And one of those ways is, do not be silent.
I think it's absolutely crucial. I think one of the things that I'd say about that, that what Extinction Rebellion, as well as the school strikes and the whole Greta Thunberg effect, and a lot of young people in the whole climate movement. But what it did is it turned silence to speech. And that was the single most important thing, because for so many people, it was like this kind of, this terrible kind of shadowed thing that was around us. But, if you talked about it, at a party or something, you'd be kind of shunned, and you'd kind of be, people would treat you as like the kind of, the wet blanket and the party pooper and all the rest of it. But in fact, it's like, to find out about it and talk about it. Also, because wherever you are is the right place to talk about it, wherever you are. And it's like, that means, to your family, it means to your friends, it means that wherever you work, because this has to be something which becomes as important and as widely recognized as the coronavirus. And it's much bigger than the coronavirus. But that what happened with COVID-19 was that that we could tell that it was being taken seriously, and therefore that there would be the governments would be able to respond in quite such firm ways, because the media was absolutely full of it, and people were talking about it in the shops with their friends. They were ringing it, it was. And when something is properly recognized, it will be properly spoken of. But it has to be.
Yeah, I think it's whenever you were talking about even Notre Dame in the book, and it brought me back to how people were so quick to rush to. I mean, obviously we know it's a beautiful building. I've been in it several times. It's got massive cultural significance, but it seemed to gather this attention, and people were so quick to contribute to it and to try and put it right. But it just seems completely barmy that we have these these other major issues that threaten the very existence of our of humanity, and we're stalling. We seem to sort of not be taking the same amount of action or an appropriate measure of action, and so it perhaps begins with even that. Just, I'm sorry, I seem to have a child and a dog now in the room, but it seems to be that kind of just speaking up and joining that cause. And I wonder if because you were arrested, and you stood trial last year, was it? And you read your speech, which is in the book, and extremely powerful. and that seemed to have a profound effect on the judge as well. It seemed to stir something. And I wondered if you wanted to speak a little bit about that.
Yes, I mean, I've never been arrested before in my life, and what I was very struck by with the whole thinking of Extinction Rebellion is that if you have a movement which is so principled and so committed to non-violence, then and you also have this commitment to mass arrests, what it is it's a self-sacrificial move. So you're not putting another person's life in danger, you're putting your own life in danger. For some people who've done that, I can't say I put my life in danger, but I certainly put my liberty at risk. And also because, you know, now I've got a criminal record, which, you know, wasn't, you know, it's not a small thing. Yeah. But I'm very proud that I did it, because I think it does matter. It's like, you know, the numbers of people that have been arrested with Extinction Rebellion who can say absolutely non-violently, and, you know, and the future will look back on this in a very different way. You know, I'm completely certain that there will be court cases, probably within 15 years, of people who have been in power, in political power and in power in the media in the last few decades. There will be trials. I'm absolutely certain of it. And I don't say this to be unkind. I'm just saying that I don't know how the future is going to look back on this age without wanting to say there has to be justice. Justice has to be done, and people will be on trial. And it, you know, and that I would rather be on the right side of history. I really, really would.
Speaking of the future, I have a little child
here. I know. Hello.
All right, love. Downstairs, 2 minutes. Of course, she wants my phone. I wondered, I mean, I really marvel at the insights that you have across so many areas. And I did wonder if you wanted to, you know, is there hope? We've sort of talked a little bit about what we can do, but do you feel optimistic where we're headed?
No. I'm sorry, I don't. And I find this question about almost like a necessity, or a kind of, you know, I feel it's like being asked to be complicit in something that's not true when people say you have to always finish on hope. There has to be an uptick. And, you know, David Attenborough's fantastic work in the last few years. My only criticism is that it's almost at the same time, or within the same 45 minutes as he's giving us devastation and terror, then suddenly all the major chords, and don't worry about it, it can be all right because this can be done and that can be done the other. What I feel is that I take the analogy of COVID-19 because it's a very helpful analogy, is that what happened at the beginning was that people were really frightened because it was frightening. It was absolutely appropriate. The media was saying, this is really frightening. There was that there was anxiety, there was fear, there was a sense that the media was telling us, you know, lots and lots of reports from hospitals, from scientists saying this could be absolutely appalling. We could see thousands and thousands of deaths. Now that was exactly right, the right thing to do at that moment. What wouldn't have been right is to say, okay, it's really terrifying, we're going to have lots of deaths, but don't worry, it'll be fine in the end. Don't worry, just don't worry about it, because then we wouldn't have done anything. It's a matter of timing. That and I don't say this lightly, because I think it's extremely upsetting and difficult for particularly honestly, the age group that I feel the sorriest for is the age group that is probably about 15, 16 to about 30, where they're the kind of age where they shouldn't have to carry this kind of weight of responsibility of knowledge, but they can't be kept out of the knowledge. Little ones need to be kept out of the knowledge, of course they do, because otherwise it's just kind of going to overload them. But collectively as a society, we have to stay in the place of urgency, emergency, fear, until that has actually brought about change, actually brought it about, like from how we vote to the technology we use to, you know, everything. And when we can actually see, like when we actually have the vaccine, as it were, to carry on the analogy, when we've actually got the vaccine, then the time will be to say, thank God for that, that was a close shave. But
Yeah.
not now, because we're nowhere near it. And I think it's fake to, you know, people don't act because out of hope. They don't. People act out of fear. You know, if I said to you, just behind you, your daughter's playing with matches and she's lit something on fire, you'd turn around, you'd cancel this program immediately, you'd put it out. Well, you'd look after your daughter and you put it out. That's what emergency does. That's what fear does. It leads to action.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Seaspiracy, the documentary on Netflix, which, you know, I was really astonished by, and in a good way, because it seemed, you know, not in a good way, but in the sense that it shed light on something that I didn't know enough about. And you sort of hope that these kinds of revelations, this kind of detective work, will begin to create change in a sort of significant way. I mean, we have a question from one of the audience members, Chloe. What are your thoughts on addressing human overpopulation as being the biggest cause of environmental destruction and climate change?
Yeah. Thanks for that question. I do understand that there are a lot of people who consider that is kind of like a single point to rally around. I don't. My reason for that is because it's twofold. The first thing is that I don't see it as exactly that there are too many lives. There are too many lifestyles that are damaging. So that's my first point, is that it's not exactly like the number of lives that there are, it's what each lifestyle is going to do. So a lifestyle which is going to kind of take, 100 times its fair share is going to be much more destructive than 100 lives that take 1%. So that's the first thing that I'd say. I think the other thing is that that too often what seems to happen is that it's that and I really in absolutely no way do I mean that the questioner has meant it like this at all. So, deep respect to you, thanks for the question, but the way that I have often heard people talk about it is almost immediately followed by people saying, because there are far too many people who are Chinese, who are Indian, who are basically in the developing world. People don't usually say overpopulation, and there's too many kind of like middle-class white people, because it's often middle-class white people who think that there are too many people who are not middle class and white. So there is a racist agenda. And again, I absolutely do not mean that the question has meant it like this. I mean that this is the context in which I've heard that many times, is that it's and again, it absolutely overshadows what is the greater truth of it, which is that it's the lifestyle of wealthy nations which is causing a climate crisis. We have sown the wind, but it's the poorest nations on earth who will reap the whirlwind. They are going to be the people who are going to be most and worst affected and did the least to create it. So if we in addition say you've got too many lives, I mean, it hurts. It hurts.
Yeah, and I think that's the core of it, and perhaps that's where the failure to act, the failure to listen, and a failure to act comes from, is that it's a hard truth and it requires too much sacrifice or change in a way that might, heaven forbid, mean losing some privileges. And you draw attention, I think, to racism and to these underlying causes, and even the way that wilderness is kind of framed as a place to be kind of tamed and made into holiday destinations, instead of just claiming it as this natural space that has been not tamed but cultivated for sometimes thousands of years. So, I mean, gosh, we've run out of time, but there's so much more to talk about. I really appreciate and admire this book and you for writing it and for continuing your work. Just thank you so much for speaking with us this evening. And I hope that, there's a candle lit here amongst us all, that we can take action in our own small but significant ways. So thank you very much, Jay.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you to our audiences both here and on YouTube.